gain characteristic from the simulated and practical cases. More so is when you are making practical cases also, you will be measuring in an anechoic chamber, the chance of getting a very good gain is more. But if you keep it on board, when you keep it on the instrument where it is supposed to work, maybe on a missile or on a satellite or on a lorry or somewhere else, the gain is going to suffer much bigger. Maybe 3 dB down, maybe the worst case you can easily get with such cases. So don't be very particular with your MATLAB values saying that 1.23 is the gain offered by the earlier author and I'm now getting 1.19 and I'm improving. No, 0.04 is just nothing in gain variations. Gain variations of 1 dB or even more is only considered. Less than 1 dB is just ignored because it is possible from the experimental values that much variation is there. Okay, so this is the gain characteristic what we try to observe. That means the gain falls as you go to higher and higher frequencies, okay, because of mismatch. Why the gain falls? Actually, as the frequency is increased from 500 megahertz to 1 gigahertz, the wavelength comes down. So for the same physical size of the antenna, as the wavelength comes down, A by lambda square increases. When A by lambda square increases, the gain has to increase because the gain and the area are related by 4 pi AE by lambda square. So when lambda is decreasing, frequency is increasing. Please remember, when lambda is decreasing, 4 pi AE by lambda square should increase or the gain should increase. But here, as you observe, the gain falls because the power what you can give it to the antenna is reducing. The power is not same what is radiated at all the frequencies because of the mismatches. So the mismatch, if you can take care, definitely the gain is going to improve. That's why in the initial portion the mismatch is much less. That's why the gain is much better, or improving from 5.75 to about 6.15 or so. But later on only it is falling because the mismatch increases. Okay, so please remember the gain characteristic should be in general upwards or increasing because the lambda is decreasing. Okay, so the radiation patterns are shown here, and this is what we are talking about, the rectangular spiral, which is easy to construct or fabricate. People do it with the wires also. A simple wire is bent in the shape that is designed, which is very easily done. Or this is printed also. Printed antennas also coming up in this. So using just 4 turns, people could get a very good rectangular spiral antenna which can work over 1:4 frequency range. 500 megahertz to 2 gigahertz is a good bandwidth, and what are the inner diameter, external diameter are all mentioned here in this case. And see now whatever I've been talking about. The input impedance, the real and imaginary parts, if you see, they are fluctuating like this, which cannot be stopped, which is very difficult to handle. And this is the major problem why the gain is falling and other things. So one has to see that a matching transformer is used between the antenna and the feeding system to see that for the feeding system it appears as though a constant real value and almost zero imaginary value is coming up for that from the antenna. So this is the challenge what the people feel in general. If you want to miniaturize the antennas also, this is the problem one has to address. Okay, that's what is done in the case of the mosquitoes and other flies, what the god has given to them. Okay, because they also use antennas to understand whether there is any obstacle in their path. They won't get hit by windows, doors, and all those things. They can roam around in a room very comfortably. All these mosquitoes we are seeing, because they set a signal towards the direction in which it tries to flow and try to understand the reflections. It has a radar system. So antennas must be lambda by 2 to get efficient radiation or reception and all those things. But it is not. They don't have very long length antennas because they are using audio signals or beyond audio frequencies they are using. But but how do they get it? Because they use very small size antennas. They know very well that the impedance mismatch is going to be there. God has given a very good biological system there which acts like this impedance mismatching aspect, okay, which will balance out the impedance mismatch or tune out the impedance mismatch and see that they will be able to get the signals required without longer size of the antennas. So please remember these characteristics play a very important role in the actual design of antennas, and input impedance is highly fluctuating type of one if you are trying to measure. So we try to avoid measuring this directly. We try to get the same type of information from VSWR characteristic. Okay, so VSWR is relatively stable parameter. So by measuring VSWR and try to see for what frequency range it can be kept below 2, because ideally VSWR we want it to be 1, but below 2 when you can keep it is okay. So that bandwidth we try to understand. That's the reason. Okay, again you are observing here that the gain is also increasing but not continuously. At some frequency it is falling down because of the impedance mismatches that are likely to happen. It's not only the gain or the impedance matching that is important to decide the bandwidth of antennas. It is a radiation pattern shape also. So the shape distortion, the changes are inevitable, but the changes must be within the acceptable limits. So how much the change in radiation pattern is happening, particularly towards the side lobes, that people are trying to observe, and not only the side lobe levels and other things. Please remember, the polarization in the side lobes will not be same as the polarization you observe in the main lobe. The polarization suffers. That means if you are designing an antenna for vertical polarization, in the side lobes, the horizontal polarization value also will be quite high. So how is the polarization ratio between vertical and horizontal? Sometimes you may be interested in horizontal, sometimes you are interested in vertical. So we don't say vertical and horizontal. We talk in terms of copolar and cross-polar components. Copolar means the desirable polarization. It can be vertical or horizontal in a specific case. Similarly, cross-polar means the undesirable polarization. Okay, that means for a vertical polarized signal, if you are getting something in horizontal polarization also, it is undesirable. So the undesirable component must be less than 20 dB at all the lobes, main lobes, side lobes, etc. We try to think of. Okay, the better one is minus 40 dB. That will be generally maintained in the zenith direction or the main beam center location and all those things. But away from that, as you go, the polarization suffers. So please remember, it's not simply the impedance characteristic or VSWR that people are interested to finalize. People are interested to know VSWR, gain characteristic, and also variations in the radiation pattern. But many a times these days, the polarization is also playing an important role. Okay, so this is the structure with the Archimedean spirals, and here the equation is slightly different, and it has okay more circular polarization bandwidth compared to the earlier case, and this is the impedance bandwidth. Okay, diagram what we are seeing. Okay, and these real and imaginary components on the left hand side, whereas on the right hand side you have the reflection coefficient taken in the dB scale is coming up. Okay, many people consider reflection coefficient dB scale is same as the return loss. Either return loss or VSWR is sufficient because both will give the same information. How much is reflected means the balance of that with the input power is going to the radiated power. That's what you understand. So the reflections, minimum points, minimum locations is the interest for all the people at all the time. So on the left hand side again, you have the gain characteristic. Okay, and again it is increasing and decreasing again, but more important on the right hand side one which you need to measure and find out for all your antennas is your radiation pattern. The radiation pattern, it is reasonably okay. That's why 0.5 gigahertz to 2 gigahertz variation is considered in these cases. Okay, and if you want to use it much higher bandwidths, then we use log periodic antennas. This log periodic means, okay, the equation comes as shown here, Ln plus 1 by L of n. That means the length of a dipole to the succeeding dipole length must have the same ratio. Similarly, the spacing between the dipoles must also be same, dn plus 1 by dn, as well as ln plus 1 by ln must be same. Then we call it as a log periodic antenna. And here you see a simple Yagi-Uda type of antenna is considered here, where the size of the dipole will be reducing. So the longest size of the dipole decides the lowest frequency of operation. The smallest size of the dipole decides the highest frequency of operation. And you see that for proper phase difference, etc., we are trying to crisscross the feed line. That means for the first dipole, it is the feeding is given at the from one line at the left side. For the next dipole, it is given onto the right side. The feeding of the same line is connected to the right arm. First left arm, then right arm, then left arm, like that one line will be going. Another line will be going first right arm, then second one left arm, third one right arm. Like this it will be going. The crisscrossing is essential to get good impedance bandwidth and all these operations. Similarly, a log periodic tooth antenna is shown on the right side with these things. Okay, and there again, as you can see, there are three regions which are observed in this. One is an active region. There are two inactive regions on both sides of this. That means they are meant for see that the signal propagates properly within the antenna structure, so that the antenna can radiate over wide frequency range without much of a change in the performance. So the radiation pattern, how nicely it is coming up, is also shown here on the rightmost. Okay, so there are three factors which we consider in this. One is the scaling factor, which we talked just a while ago, L2 by L1, like that. Similarly, the spacing factor, S by 2L1, as is shown in the previous diagram, and the apex angle. So these three factors are the design parameters to see a particular log periodic antenna works very well for the desired frequency or range. Okay, so these are the simplifications what you can understand. And let me see, somebody raised a hand. Okay, oh, I can give a break and ask the person to okay, yeah, please, whoever wanted to ask a doubt, please go ahead. Unmute the mic, please, for the persons.
Sir.
Yeah.
If anybody asking queries, please go through chat box only.
Yeah, where is the chat box for me? Let me see. I'm full screen, no?
If query is there, I will read, sir. No problem.
Okay, no problem. Okay, yeah, please. Somebody wanted. Let us accept the first one query first to start with.
Dear participants, if any queries, please go through chat box only. I will read it out and sir will explain.
Okay. So length of the first dipole decides the lower band. Length of the last dipole decides the upper band. Smallest size decides the upper band. Longest size decides the lower band. And log periodic antenna dipole, which we have used, LPDA we call it. Low weight, less cost, and simple construction. That's the advantage with these things, as we normally quote with your Yagi-Uda antenna also. So other similar cases, just for an example, we have taken 35 megahertz to 60 megahertz, almost 1:2. Okay, and scale factor is 0.93. That is, and characteristic impedance of the line is to be 50 ohms, and you can connect this voltage source at the center of the dipole. Okay, shortest dipole, which is at the longer end, you can see, and these are the equations what you are going to get. So this is how the design is going to come, and very easily people maintain these things. Particularly this sort of things you may be observing at the airports for initial communications. Okay, first to get some indication, these type of antennas are used. Once an indication comes from any aircraft or for some other vehicles and something else, then they'll identify the frequency and use better radiating or better receiving antennas which can operate at lower frequencies or lower power, etc. We can see with that. And see again the impedance variation of this. The impedance is supposed to be 50 ohms, but you cannot guess or maintain that completely over 50 ohms. It will be even 40 ohms at certain frequencies also. And see again the reactance variation. The reactance variation is reasonably low, okay, because below 20 ohms on both sides, minus 20 plus 20. So that is much better, okay. And this is the gain characteristic what we are observing. And again, gain is falling, that has to be taken care appropriate. And see here, what is the change in the radiation pattern. Slowly, the unwanted things are going to come. That's why we restrict it to 60 megahertz. If you go to 70 megahertz also, it may be able to radiate, but the radiation pattern will be highly distorting and it may not suffice the purpose. Okay, so these are all some of the wideband antennas what we have come across. And now let us see what are the multi-band antennas. As I told you, multi-band means at certain specific frequency range values only we would like to radiate, and around that maybe 5% bandwidth or whatever it is. We don't want to radiate over say 30 megahertz to 60 megahertz. We want to radiate over 30, 45, 48, 53, 60. Like this, some specified frequencies only we want to radiate to avoid the noise in other frequencies which are not used. So spider beam, quad antenna, like this, there are different names we have to get these multi-band antennas. As we all know, we are going for more printed antennas in our research activity because of ease of operations and many other things. So here, a simple dipole antenna is shown which has some parasitic elements. That means around the radiating dipoles, we have placed two parasitic elements. That means they are existing, but they are not connected with the dipole which is excited. So this WD2 and LD2 are the actual ones which are the sizes of the dipole which is radiating. WD3, LD3 or WD1, LD1. These ones are the parasitic slots. To see that it operates over two frequencies. The dipole size wise it operates at one frequency. Because of the parasitic elements, it also operates at a different frequency. And from the feed line up to the dipole which is radiating, you are seeing some square patches also. Those square patches are the actual impedance matching transformers. Okay, because the input line is 50 ohms, it has to be divided into two. So equally power, if you want to divide, the divided line will have 100 ohms impedance, because 100 parallel 100 will give you only 50 ohms. So the 100 ohms line which is to be taken, okay, from the feeding line must be again converted to 50 ohms, because the antennas are designed for 50 ohms. So to convert 100 ohm to back to 50 ohms, we simply use a lambda by 4 transformer with 70.7 ohms, okay, square root of 100 into 50. Okay, that type of a simple lambda by 4 transformer is used here, and that will be converting the 100 ohm line back to 50 ohms that can be fed directly to the antennas. You may ask me, sir, why don't we use 100 ohm rectangular patches itself? Yes, but there are other practical difficulties to use such 100 ohm patches. Okay, or one more option is you try to choose the point on the patch where it can offer 100 ohms. But choosing that point was not so easy in the good olden times, because the equations and other things we have taken only with the center fed patch like this, whatever you are seeing here. Equations were available and other things. But today we have mathematical solvers which can be used to identify the impedance point where it gives 100 ohms or even 80 ohms, 60 ohms, or whatever number you want. You can identify the feeding point. That's the advantage with the today's solvers. What we have, like your Micro Studio, CST Micro, or HFSS, etc. You can identify and okay, do some more research activity on these balloon designs, or get away with balloons and whatever is possible. Okay, miniaturization and many other aspects can be done. Of course, it has to be taken care with not only with reference to resistance value, it has to be taken care in terms of reactance offered also at those points. Okay, so this is a different research area altogether. Let us not touch at this point of time. The CPW feed line, coplanar waveguide type of feed line, is used to see that the wide band of operation is possible with this. The feeding line must be giving exactly 50 ohms or a wide frequency range. Then only the antenna can work properly in that. That's why the CPW is preferred for such cases. But it has its own difficulties also in operationally. So you have to balance between these two things. So this is the reflection coefficient graph S11 in dB modulus, and this theory and measurement, or the simulation and measurement. As you can see, in simulation you may get very deep nulls, and yes, you can clearly identify what is the best resonant frequency, etc. But in practice it is very difficult to get such a deep null. Okay, reflection coefficient is not a easy way to measure these things. So one has to be careful about it, or unless you measure, you won't know the difficulties of these aspects. Now, if you want to make it as a triple band instead of dual band, people have attempted that also. Okay, depending on the third band what you want to operate, you expand the parasitic elements slightly more. Okay, so these expansions we are observing now compared to the earlier one, LT4, WT4, etc., or WT1, LT1, etc. The expansions of these parasitic patches, that expansion decides the third frequency range, and this is how the graph is going to come for those cases. So again, this is an excellent theory and measurement graph. You can say a comparison, because it's very difficult to get that much close even, okay, in practice. So please remember, and the three frequencies where the resonance has to occur, or where the radiation has to be maximum, you can identify by choosing the size of these patches, the gap, and the extensions what you are trying to give. You can choose these things. So the other recent developments in the multi-band antenna design is using the artificial materials, or what we call them as metamaterials. So in metamaterials, as you might have gone through now, there are many varieties. A simple one what we are showing here is a split ring resonator. So it is a double negative resonator, double negative material. That means epsilon is negative, mu is negative, like this we can get it. So split ring is placed on the patch antenna on the reverse side. That means on the feeding side you are going to place. So normal patch will give rise to one frequency range of operation. By placing this split ring resonator, it's a closed loop. Instead of a loop, you can also have a rectangular one. But for the current to enter and come out, there will be two splits on the two rings, which are kept one inside the other. The two rings are kept one inside the other. For the current to flow in the entire region appropriately, we are keeping two breaks. So two breaks will give rise to the word split, and the shape is ring, and it works like a LC network. That's why it is known as resonator. So split ring resonator, or simply SRR, is used to get another frequency of operation in this. What is the advantage with these things compared to the earlier case? Suppose you want to operate at say 3 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz in antenna. The previous methods are to design first a 3 gigahertz antenna, which is longer size, and then adjust some way, or putting a slot, inclined slot, or cross, or something else on that, and make it operational also at 5 gigahertz. So the physical size is corresponding to 3 gigahertz, which is much larger. Now with these split ring resonators, what is the advantage we get is that we now design the original antenna at 5 gigahertz first, and then put the split ring resonator to see that it operates now at 3 gigahertz also. So miniaturization, compactness is the additional benefit what we are going to get by using these split ring resonators. That's how they have become very, very popular in the recent times. Okay, so this is what the exact size and design parameters and design variables are shown in this slide, and you can have a close look of these things at a later time. Okay, so this is the graph what they've got with these things. So below 10 dB, whatever reflection coefficient graph is having, that is considered for the band of operation. And at 3 bands it is going to operate, and you have 3 different bandwidths possible for this. So as I told you, the original patch is designed for the highest frequency of operation. In this case, it has been designed for about 2.25 gigahertz or so. So at the original frequency, it offers wider band. At the metamaterial placed frequency or this filtering resonator size, it is going to offer lower bandwidth. Why lower bandwidth is because the resonator is going to act like LC network and hold some amount of energy. It will not allow all the energy to be radiated. So when the energy radiated is less, the mismatch is also going to be less, and other aspects that will reduce the band of operation, because addition of LC network, the reactance is changed. So this is another type of multiband antenna where a long feed line is used, and at the end of it you are going to put a spiral or a loop type of thing in this. And this is again to be able to operate at various frequencies. We try to think of a CPW type of feeding structure for this. That's why the initial portion is having the top surface also, which acts like a ground for that. On both sides ground will be there, and the center line will be the feeding line. So the feeding line acts over a very wide range, and the antenna can take power only a certain range of frequencies. That decides the bandwidth of operation. Okay, and it's not necessary that we should use only rectangular or something like that. You can use many other shapes also, like this, whatever has been shown, and you can get good circular polarization with other things. It's not that we need to use only slots and other things. You can think of slits also, very narrow sized ones. And again, all alphabet diagrams are possible. So here they have shown T-shaped, J-shaped, etc. And you can have this, and you can make it into multi-band by increasing the number of layers on your microstrip antenna. As you can see, different materials are used one over the other. Epsilon R1, above that is epsilon R2, above that is epsilon R3. Like this, 3 different materials are used, and the feeding line is extended up to epsilon R2 layer, and beyond that the radiation patch is capped, and we get the radiation for this. Okay, so structure of the layers is shown on the left hand side, and on the top surface how the radiation is there. It is again 2 U-shaped patches we are using to get multi-band operation into these things. So this is how the multi-band is obtained in this. As you can see, 3 distinct bands are there. Okay, and slight shift in the measurements is likely to happen. It's very difficult to get exactly at the same frequencies. Okay, so you design the antenna, try to fabricate it and get the actual values, and then only be satisfied. So don't say that my simulation is giving me so your antenna should work. It's not necessary. There will be definitely some shift because of the tolerances or errors in the fabrication process. Now coming to the ultra wideband antennas, which means over very large range of frequencies, 3 to 10 gigahertz or 3 to 8 gigahertz. Like this, people are asking for very wide range of frequencies for particularly imaging systems or ground penetrating radar and many other applications. People are going for these ultra wideband antennas, and this ultra wideband is required also in the wireless systems where very complicated modulation schemes are used. Because when you go for more complication in the modulation, you know the time period is getting reduced drastically, and when the time period is less, it occupies more bandwidth. We are all aware of it. So such cases can be taken care, and this ultra wideband was essential for even wireless personal area network communications, wireless LANs, etc., and high speed networking solutions for burst data transmissions. Okay, so the capacity is very high, low power and low cost as usual with all antenna designs we want, and power level must be as high as possible, wideband nature, and signal integrity is very crucial. Okay, so signal intelligence is also crucial in these aspects. That is what we observe in this. Okay, so Intelligent sensors is another area where these ultra wideband signals are very much necessary. Intelligent airbags, driving and parking aids, because they have to work in a very short time. If there is any minor problem, the airbag has to be opened in the car. So the time period of the signal what you get is very narrow. So it occupies very wide band. So when there is likely to be a collision with another car or another type of hurdle, then the time given is very small, or that the entire system has to react and open the airbag for the safety of the drivers. So these intelligent transport systems, okay, are using this ultra wideband systems or ultra wideband communications, and they similarly, as I was telling you, radars which are used to identify the buried objects inside the ground. Okay, so there also you require, and you want to image what exactly is there inside that. So these are all other applications of your wideband. Okay, and these are some of the personal area communications, like you are using a laptop as well as a TV and tab, etc., for different applications simultaneously from a same router. Then you want to go for a ultra wideband communication system for those things. Okay, and they extremely small transmit power and short communication
and MTech
distance.
from
But
Tyagaraja College of
wideband
Engineering.
is the most important aspect one has to see. See, these are all the systems what we are using in our homes at different time instants, but in future we may be using them parallelly. So we need good amount of bandwidth for these things. Similarly, ground penetrating radars to understand any landmines and other things. When military people are moving, one person will be moving with a sensor like this to identify whether there are any concealed bombs or IEDs, etc. in the road they are going to go, and see whether it is safe for the military people to go or not. Okay, and even in Kashmir and other places, we have seen some bad incidents because of these sort of problems. So ground penetrating radars will do a good job on all these aspects, and military communications, they need all sorts of frequency signals for various applications. So small size, easy for fabrication, return loss characteristic must be less than 10 dB very specifically, or VSWR must be less than 3, both are same. Radiation pattern in general will be omnidirectional pattern you will be looking for, and again greater than 2 dBi. So in most of the cases, meeting this ultra wideband limit may be difficult. So what people try to do is that they do design 2 or even 3 antennas in some cases, and they will have overlapping band of operation, so that the signal is never missed by any of these things. And generally, these UWB antennas are designed with a number of antennas which are having slightly different bandwidths. Okay, the bandwidths may be same, and the center frequencies are slightly changing over the entire frequency range of interest. So stagger tuning type of things will use. Staggered antenna systems are designed, and you will have this, but there is a problem of this, whether the antenna is going to be dispersive or non-dispersive. What is that? Is that the antenna is going to work like a resonant system or a non-resonant system. Non-resonant systems are found to be very wide band of operations. Like you might have studied rhombic antenna, which works very well at HF range or a very long range of frequencies. So similarly here also, we try to see that the antenna will have traveling current all the time, and see that the phase delay at various frequencies is almost the same. Okay, similar to what the DSP people will talk of as linear phase filters. Okay, the phase constant beta versus frequency, we would like it to be linear as much as possible. So in the entire length of the antenna also, we try to see that various frequency signals, as they travel, they get into the radiation at the same time, and see that they travel together all the time. So in that way, we try to make them as a non-dispersive one. If the omega beta diagram is not linear, then we call it as a dispersive antenna, and they will give rise to low band of operations. So this is an important characteristic, and based on this is what is taken. Okay, this group delay is your beta, right? Phase shift constant or group delay is what we call it as, and this group delay variation is only going to change the antenna performance every time. So that's what we are putting it in this. A Vivaldi antenna is exactly a non-dispersive antenna. As you can see here, from the feeding point is somewhere here. The waves are slowly expanded. How slowly you expand gives rise to wider band of operations. So here, as you can see, once the waves are entered into this, this is a transition region. The initial portion of this opening out is considered as the transition region, which will convert the proper electrical signals into electromagnetic waves, and then the waves are released from this region. So this transition region into radiation region, we need a very slow change. But as you go for a slow change, the antenna size increases. So you have to make a balance between the size of the antenna and what is the transition you are providing for this. So here, this curve is an exponential curve. What we are going to have, the outermost size decides the low frequency of operation. The innermost size of this radiation zone decides the high frequency of operation, and below that, almost parallel lines like that, as it appears to be here, is known as the transition zone. Okay, so how efficiently you design these transition zone and radiation zone with different types of exponential curves decides the frequency of operation. But Vivaldi is considered the best UWB antenna. It's a coplanar broadband antenna which is made from dielectric plate, metal sized on both sides. Okay, and Peter Gibson is the inventor of this Vivaldi antenna, and Vivaldi antennas are now the most crazy items on electronic warfare systems. Okay, in EW, this plays a very important role because EW must work for 3 to 10 gigahertz ultra wideband. So the best known and easy to manufacture in large numbers and many other aspects, this Vivaldi antenna is satisfying, and thereby the Vivaldi is the best choice or the most hot cake in the defense market. Okay, so the slot width is smaller than half the free space wavelength, and waves traveling through this curved region will be slowly modified into radiation mode from the propagation mode. Propagation mode means between the transmission lines when they are traveling, it is the propagation mode. Okay, and without transmission lines, we are making them to travel on their own. So that is the radiation mode. It's like your kids who are coming to +2 stage and beyond that. Okay, you will not be guiding them all the time. Below 10th class and all that only, you'll be guiding them continuously. That's the propagation mode. After that, you'll be leaving them on their own and give some instructions here and there, and they'll work out everything on their own. That's the propagation radiation mode, what you can consider in these cases. Okay, so the waves which are traveling here are basically surface waves. So one has to see how the surface waves can be radiated properly, or in end fire mode, it's going to operate mostly. So the bandwidth of operation is decided based on the curve what you are going to use in these things. The tapered slot is the original name to start with, and slowly with modifications and adding the balloon and all those things, people have made it to this as a Vivaldi antenna. Okay. So how is the maximum size is decided? How is the width is decided? These are all the basic equations that are given. And if you want now, even we are at Warangal, we are designing even an antenna which can work from 1 to 18 gigahertz. This 1 to 18 type of things are required in the antenna measurement systems, where you need to transmit a signal to test any other given antenna by a user. So the user may come with sometimes with 9 gigahertz antenna or 3 gigahertz or 6 gigahertz or whatever. So if you use this 1 to 18 gigahertz antenna as transmitter, any user antenna, whatever you get, you can easily take the measurement on that and give the performance to the user without much of a difficulty. Every time you need not change the antenna on your transmitter side depending on the frequency of the user's receiving antenna. So in that way, they are looking for this sort of very, very wide band antennas. And there, instead of 1 to 18 gigahertz, one antenna cannot give. So what we try to do is 1 to 8 gigahertz, we design one antenna, and 6 to 18 gigahertz is another antenna what we can design. So two Vivaldis are designed for these things. But please remember, the equations have to be different. Okay, it's not that you scale up the equations or scale down the equations and antennas work. The Vivaldi is a very peculiar one. It follows whatever it can. You have to understand and design as per those things. It doesn't exactly follow the design equations. Please remember, that's the trick in these things. That's what we did, and we have delivered these antennas to defense people. So 1 to 8 gigahertz we design, but it operates very well over 1 to 6 gigahertz. And again, one more is the even 4 to 18 we design, but it operates very well over 6 to 18 gigahertz. So 6 to 8 gigahertz is the overlap, that's okay. And now they're trying to use these things for various other applications which are classified. Okay, so this is the equation what I have been talking about. This R equal to 0.2 need not be same over the entire range. Again, you can divide into 2 or 3 types of equations and slightly change this 0.2 to 0.3, 0.25, something like that, and do many more things on this to get the desired range of operation. Please remember, it is the change in the radiation pattern that's the most important, rather than the simple impedance variation or the VSWR variation or the gain variation. The changes in the radiation pattern are within the tolerable limits or not. And the balloon is used here, that circular shape of one, okay, is used here to give better impedance match. And even the sectoral balloon is used on some cases on the other side also. And this is for an array of Vivaldi antennas what people have designed. Okay, so tapered slot, Vivaldi are considered to be synonymous words in this context, and this is how the return loss characteristic is going to come in these things. Okay, so this is the gain characteristic. It continuously increases from 1 to 4 gigahertz or so, but beyond that it decreases because of the impedance variation, very large values and non-impedance. So here, this is the earlier one is made over a ground plane. That means top plate will have that Vivaldi shape, but here it is going to be both sides this Vivaldi shape. The ground plane side also you are going to have on tapered slot instead of continuous copper. Okay, so this is another type what you can have on this. And next is the limitations of this is antipodal configuration. Cross polarization is going to be the major issue, and this is how the antipodal structure is going to be made. And this is a 16 by 16 case. A balanced antipodal Vivaldi antenna is the most popularly used, simply called it as BAVA. Okay, so this is where, okay, the center point you will have one line on the, okay, that means additional layer is kept, and on both sides there will be tapered slots, okay, on the ground plane sides of these things, and it works very well. That's why it is a 3-layered structure. As you can see on the right side diagram, the center line will be actually feeding on both sides for the radiations to occur. So it is a balanced line on both sides. The center line is going to be very much in the same shape of your Vivaldi and all those things. So it's that way we have got very, very wide band of operation possible with these things. So these are some of the ways what I was talking to you regarding that. And even a simple monopole can work. Okay, that's how Marconi has started long ago and all these times. But instead of that simple monopole, better things have come these days with the fractal antennas. Okay, a triangular one is used, or a with the triangles, again the triangles are taken out to see that it operates over very, very wide range of frequencies, or a slot loop type of thing is used for in certain cases for very simple applications. And on the reverse side of this, it's going to be like this for better impedance matching. Instead of a complete copper sheet, they're going to keep in this manner to give a better ground plane effect and reduce the surface waves. The most important point why the bandwidth gets reduced is on the printed antennas, the surface waves start flowing and they start giving rise to unnecessary reflections, and the impedance mismatch is likely to be more. If you can remove the surface waves, then the radiation is going to be much better over a long range of frequencies. So these are the ones what I wanted to say about the UWB antennas and other types of antennas what we are going to have in these aspects. So this is one array, a novel monopole antenna. Okay, planar monopole antenna is there here. Okay, and it is coming up, and adding some more parasitic patches will give rise to some improvement in terms of this multi-band characteristic type of thing what we are going to have on this. Okay, so at this point let me conclude with these ultra band and other things, and it is going to the future, and the future is wireless USB. That means without keeping USB line, you are going to get connected with these USB devices basically, because you will have simple transmitters and receivers kept on all these things, and they all need to work. And sometimes with the help of a router in between, or people are looking for direct communication. Peer-to-peer communication is becoming very fast, like between your computer and laptop, sorry, computer and printer. You don't want to keep any lines, you don't want to keep any router or whatever it is. We want them to communicate with each other, and whatever print you want to get it. Similarly, from your mobile onto your laptop, or from your mobile onto the printer, you don't want to have anything in between. Straight away we want them to work, and those are coming up in a big way. So in such cases, this type of antennas and other things play an important role. Okay, so antenna is becoming more a digital one. Please remember, antenna so far is considered as an analog element. Now people are going for digital ones on these antennas, and with the mathematical solvers, we are now able to find out for very complicated signals also how the radiation pattern is going to be, and how much is the bandwidth what we can get, how is the polarization effect that's going to come. So these are all important things compared to a simple impedance diagram and say I got the antenna performance. Please, antenna impedance diagram is only a first level one. Our return loss graph is a very elementary one. People are more interested about the radiation pattern values, changes, and other things, lobes, how exactly they are following, how where the nulls are, and what is the polarization of the signal in those things. What is the copolar component? What's the cross-polar component? So these are all the important points. And you may say, sir, when split ring resonator is used, you are saying that there is good compactness and other things. Yeah, the disadvantage with these things, one of the things what is quoted in general is that the radiation efficiency falls, because the resonator holds the energy. All the energy whatever you are providing is not radiated. Some energy is kept on the resonator itself. So the radiation efficiency is coming down from 100% to 90%, 80% like this. More and more varieties of resonators you are going to do. That means the power is not radiated. So what's the purpose of using such an antenna? So resonators are to be used very judiciously, and see that you get the required bands and with good radiating power as much as possible. So this is where the trade-off comes between the split ring resonator type and the conventional type of design of the multi-band antennas, etc. Okay, if you have any questions, we can take for 5 minutes, and then we can go for a break for 15 minutes and then come back to the next topic. So may I have some doubts or any other points, please? Let me try to answer you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. There are some queries are there, sir.
Yeah, please read.
There is one query from Shali. How to increase bandwidth of fractal antenna?
Yeah, by using different types of fractals. One is the one simplest solution is all fractals will not give rise to the same thing. Only by seeing that it repeats appropriately to multiple stages. Okay, normally we use only zeroth order, first order iterations and other things. If you can go for higher order and where the shape remains the same, self-complementary structure, yes, we can increase the bandwidth of operation. And again, I'm telling you, we can go for some types of metamaterials on the fractal antennas where you can increase the bandwidth of operation also. Okay, or in metamaterial we include the fractal concept. Okay, that's what has been done at Warangal to increase the wide bandwidth of operation. Okay, right.
Okay, sir. Next query is that is from Rao. How can we check polarization for wideband of frequencies?
Yeah, you have to check at various frequencies step by step. Polarization means receiving antenna, we'll keep it in vertical, see what is the signal. Then we keep it horizontal, see what is the signal from coming from your transmitting antenna, and take a ratio and other things as appropriately at various frequencies, at various angles. Okay, conventionally people have been taking in the zenith direction, where the main lobe zero direction and other things people have been taking. Now the interest has gone to other directions also, so other directions and other frequencies. It's a time consuming process. Okay, yes.
Sir, there is another query from Dr. Adinarayana.
Okay.
If you go for wideband antenna, are there any disadvantages?
Yeah, wideband antenna, if you are not using the signal, if you're not getting the signals in the entire band or reasonably 90% of the band and all those things, noise is going to enter. Okay, because we are keeping the antennas in the open space, is it not? So as you know, noise is there in all the frequencies. Noise enters. Once the noise enters, we know all the difficulties associated with the noise. So many noise cancellation techniques or noise removal techniques, all these things must be used. Even if you use digital things, but why to take noise first and then removing it? Prevention is better than cure. So wideband, when you are thinking of, be sure that your signals occupy good amount of bandwidth at all the time. Okay.
Sir, there
Next
is
one.
one question. Gauri Shankar Sharma.
Okay.
How do we decide position and dimension of slot in case of slot feed DRA based memo antenna?
Yes, yes, yes. It is a big question. Okay, yeah. So the mathematical solvers are only giving us the advantage. Very standard rules and other things don't exist. So just by trial and trial and error methods, cut and try methods, people try to identify the location and the orientation of the slot and other things also. I don't think very fixed equations are available anytime. It's very difficult to come to that point. Next one, please.
So there is a question from Lakshman Kumar from MEGR.
Okay.
When we plot axial ratio versus frequency, the axial ratio at every frequency is measured for same theta and phi.
Yes.
When we plot axial ratio in simulation tool, which theta and phi we should consider?
Generally main lobe zero direction. Okay, zenith direction, that's what we call it. So general zenith direction we take the e theta and e phi. Okay, and go on changing the frequency at various frequencies, whatever is e theta and e phi for that particular location, we put the graph as axial ratio graph. Okay, yes.
So there is a question from Saujanya. Okay, we are using different shapes of slots for the expansion of frequency ranges. Other than that, can we use any other techniques to operate on different band of frequencies?
Yes, I told you earlier also, the metamaterials are coming in a big way. Instead of slots and other things are, okay, changing the shapes. You can change the boundary by using fractals and add some metamaterials also on that, and we achieve more than 60% bandwidth in those cases also, and even good amount of circular polarization, etc. So instead of slot, first change you can make it is the boundary wise you can change it to Koch fractal or Minkowski fractal and this sort of fractals. The second one, still if you want to increase, you can go for using the metamaterials on those things. Okay, wideband operating metamaterials are there, you can increase those things. And if you want still more, you can go for HIS, that means high impedance surfaces. That means the thickness of the antenna increases, but by keeping one more layer with different types of patches and other things, you can still increase the bandwidth of operation. So people have gone even for 80% bandwidth and all those things. I've seen so many papers on that, which is very, very high compared to 5% what is referred for microstrip antennas. From 5, now people have gone to 60%, 70%, like that. Yes. Okay.
So there is
Shall we
one
give a
question.
break for 15 minutes now?
So, so this is
11:45, can we meet?
okay, sir. Last query, sir. Listen.
Please. Okay, go ahead.
Chandrasekhar Rao. Sir, while calculating dimensions of antennas UWB systems, which frequency we have to select?
Yeah, center frequency is taken in general to start with. Okay, and there are points and okay, some controversies on those things also. Should we take arithmetic mean, geometric mean, and all these sort of things? Whichever one works well, then we take it. That's the advantage of using these mathematical solvers. You need not rewrite the program, everything, redo all those things. Just by changing the dimensions here and there in your software tool, you are getting various responses, and whichever one suits you well, you are taking it. Yes, arithmetic mean is generally taken, but there are people who are saying that geometric mean should also be considered.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So,
11:45 we'll meet again.
Dear
Okay?
participants, we'll meet again at 11:45. It's a break for 15 minutes. Thank you.